informations que nous avons partagées jusqu'à maintenant et de réitérer de façon claire que sa position sur les opérations extrajudiciaires à l'étranger sera désormais sans équivoque alignée avec le droit international. Le Canada va toujours défendre l'État de droit et les principes fondamentaux sur lesquels s'appuient les sociétés libres et démocratiques. Nous incitons le gouvernement de l'Inde à en faire de même. I know the events of the past year and today's revelations have shaken many Canadians, particularly those in the Indo-Canadian and Sikh community. Many of you are angry, upset, frightened. I get that. This shouldn't happen. Canada and India have a long and storied history rooted in people-to-people ties, business, and trade. But we cannot abide by what we're seeing right now. Canada fully respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of India, and we expect the Indian government to do the same for Canada. As Prime Minister, it is my responsibility to provide reassurance to those who are feeling their safety has been compromised, but most importantly, it is my responsibility to take action and to never hesitate in doing what is necessary to protect Canadians. That is precisely what we are doing today. I'll now turn it over to Minister LeBlanc to provide additional details on these developments. Dominic.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Bonjour à tous. Les graves conclusions présentées aujourd'hui par le commissaire de la GRC sont le résultat de plusieurs mois d'enquête et de travail acharné, évidemment de la part de la GRC, c'est sûr, mais en collaboration avec des corps de police partout au pays, dans des grandes villes comme Toronto, Surrey, Edmonton, partout au Canada et des corps de police provinciaux aussi. J'aimerais remercier tous ceux et celles qui ont joué un rôle dans cette enquête tellement complexe. For many Canadians, particularly Indo-Canadians and members of the Sikh community, this news will be understandably very upsetting. The actions that are alleged to have taken place on Canadian soil are indeed a grave violation of our sovereignty and of Canada's rule of law. But I also hope that Canadians find relief in knowing that our law enforcement and national security agencies are working to keep them safe and to hold to account those who seek to harm Canadians. I strongly encourage...
In some cases, a certain amount of more detailed raw material or at least primary analysis. Takes me about 45 minutes to an hour on given days, and that's sort of the regular baseline. Some of it is incredibly highly classified, some of it is slightly more routine. But on top of that, usually at least once a week, I end up sitting down in a secure room with advisors and officials to talk through some of the more germane or difficult or contentious or urgent intelligence that is being worked on or received at any given moment.
Okay. And how's the new system working for you? So the weekly reading period plus the briefings?
It is working well. The consuming of information in that weekly briefing is really just that. I will sometimes ask for follow-up questions on this issue or that issue, or verify that, okay, this seems very serious. Reassure me that everyone is taking this very seriously and acting on it, and the client relations officer, or CRO, will do that. But if there are specific questions I have for the client relations officer. Usually, they will be answered to me in the next meeting I have with the NSIA. Or sometimes there'll be an addendum or a specific document that will be handed to me the following week in answer to the questions I have. In general, I tend to prefer to be able to challenge and ask questions right away of the NSIA, of people in positions of authority or power, to be able to, or influence over the actual collection and operations, to be able to ask them for more details than sometimes comes out. So I tend to prefer those in-person briefings, but having that baseline of a weekly session with a vast range of information is very useful.
Okay. Speaking more substantively now in terms of what intelligence is brought to your attention specifically, there's been a lot of discussion in the Commission's proceedings, you may know, about whether or not certain intelligence has reached you, certain information, and whether it should have. And there's also been a lot of discussion about the vast universe of intelligence and information that's out there. One figure we've heard is 70,000 products produced by or published by the Canadian intelligence community per year. So assuming you're not going to read the 70,000, and though not all 70,000 will come into your attention, what is it that you expect to see? What is it that you need to see as Prime Minister?
I need to see information that is germane to my role as Prime Minister. And that means things that are directly impacting or threatening Canadians, things that are linked to particular policy decisions we need to make as a government, whether in an approach to a particular issue or region of the world or indeed country, or whether it's looking at improvements that need to be made in our national security legislation or agencies, things where there are perhaps gaps highlighted or tools that would be necessary to act on to combat new threats around disinformation or misinformation that certainly nobody was thinking of 20 years ago to the same degree, or information that's particularly germane if I'm going to a G7 or a NATO meeting or a G20 where I will be interacting with various leaders. Are there things that I need to know about them that are relevant for our interactions or our potential interactions? I guess in general, I mean, I have to trust, and I do, the intelligence officials, and more specifically, my national security and intelligence advisor, to make determinations on what it is that I need to see as a summary, what I need to see as a full analysis, or what I might even need to see in raw intelligence. And over the years of working with NSIAs, I would say that they have gotten very good at knowing what it is that I already know about, what it is that I'm particularly interested in and I'm going to ask more questions about, and what it is that I really should see the raw intel and an evaluation of. The source is, it's a single source but reliable, or a single source and somewhat unreliable, but the information is so explosive that you should have it in your brain. That sort of frame is very much why I have a national intelligence and security and intelligence advisor, to be able to know, okay, the PM already knows about, the point of this document. We don't need to give him the full document. I can simply apprise it on him, and he can spend his time digging into these other more relevant or newer pieces of information that will complete his understanding of the threats and realities faced by Canada and Canadians.
Okay, so the primary responsibility then for making sure that you do have what you need to know, and maybe don't have what you don't need to know, or that you don't spend your time on the wrong things, that falls to the NSIA, as you've said.
I would say the primary repository of those decisions is the NSIA, but there are a number of others who will flag that. Sometimes it's my foreign policy and defense advisors, Patrick Travers, or others in my office who will see a larger range of information than I do because they have a specific task on that one area, whereas I'm covering all policy areas for this country. They will dig in and say, okay, the PM really should see this because it's particularly relevant for these reasons that are perhaps not, perhaps more political reasons that the NSIA, looking at it from an official lens, wouldn't have. In some cases, the clerk of the Privy Council will flag things for me, or the director of CSIS in meetings with him, he will say, no, you really should follow up on this or that. But in general, the filter through which everything goes is the NSIA, with whom I need to have a very close relationship, with whom I do, and a bond of not just trust in the judgment that she puts forward on what I should see or what I shouldn't see, but she needs to have a pretty good idea of the things I know about, the things I need to know more about, and the things that are going to be of particular interest or importance to me.
Okay, that's fair. So it's not just the NSIA.
No, but it's primarily the NSIA, as you said.
Fair enough. But so it's a close two-way working relationship then.
Very, very.
And we've also heard that the part of the NSIA's role is to sort of play a convening role within the national security community. So it's a significant role. And there have been suggestions made, for instance, in the NCERA report, that the role should be formalized in a legal instrument. We've also heard talk in these commission's proceedings from the clerk, I believe, who suggested the idea of a mandate letter, perhaps. What are your thoughts on that?
Over the course of the years that I've been Prime Minister, we've had a number of different changes to the National Security Advisor role. One of the changes I made reasonably early on was actually adding National Security and Intelligence Advisor, because it wasn't just about security. Intelligence was becoming more and more important in our approach. But from one NSIA to the next, there were significant changes in the threat environment around us, in the composition of the senior ranks of the public service and the different roles. When Ian Shugart was my clerk, he came at that role with such a deep and expert understanding of international issues, of intelligence issues, that he played a role not just as a clerk, but as a significant national intelligence and security advisor to me, just as through his capabilities and personality, and therefore the actual NSIA I had at that point had a slightly different role than in other times where the clerk wasn't as much of a national security focused individual and had other qualities, and the National Security Advisor was really the person who was centered around that for me. So those natural variations, and for example, the fact that right now my National Security and Intelligence Advisor is also Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council, which I think is very useful in this case, isn't necessarily automatically something every future Prime Minister would want. Therefore, the idea of bounding in very prescriptive legislation, the role of a National Security and Intelligence Advisor, I think would be probably less flexible than the role actually requires, because the most important part of the role is that the individual be empowered and connected to the Prime Minister in the right way, but also able to command the town or the intelligence agency's respect and be able to convene. So some of the things we've done to strengthen and almost codify that role are around around the creation of the National Security Council, which is more of a strategic convening of ministers and top officials to look forward around larger issues as opposed to an IRG, incident response group, which is to respond to a specific incident. This is a more strategic look, and the role of the National Security and Intelligence Advisor is to be the secretary to that council, the same way the clerk of the Privy Council is also secretary to cabinet. It's a role that gives them an official lever in convening and controlling the work done at that particular table, whether it be a cabinet for the clerk or the NSC for the NSIA. So that has already strengthened and codified to a certain extent the role of the NSIA. But we have found that publishing mandate letters that delineate clearly my expectations of what, in most cases, ministers, which is what they're directed at, are expected to do and what authorities they have and how they're expected to function, has been incredibly useful, a tool that is very bespoke for the moment you're in and the kind of organization that your government has particularly set up. Publishing the mandate letters means that the public knows clearly what is expected of these individuals. Journalists and academics can dig into, whether a particular official or minister is fulfilling their role as expected and how they're doing on that. But the most important use of the mandate letters we've actually found is internal to government themselves. We find that public servants in various departments regularly consult the mandate letters that we have published so that they know exactly what the minister is responsible for, what they're actually trying to do. And a mandate letter for the National Security and Intelligence Advisor would seem to me to be an excellent use of both empowering and clarifying the expectations of a given government at a given moment in a public way, but also an accountable way.
So that would be a way to maybe give some structure without compromising on flexibility?
I wouldn't say that because it's not the mandate letter that gives the structure. The way we set up the office, the way we task and empower various parts of government is inherent. The mandate letter would would reveal that structure and give direction on the outcomes that we want to have. And I think that's where it could be useful.
Okay. I'm going to come back to the National Security Council because it's something I want to discuss in more depth. But before that, and before leaving the topic of information flow more generally, there's a couple of intelligence products that have come up repeatedly in the Commission's proceedings that I want to ask you about. One is called the targeting paper. And so this one is, just to introduce it briefly, a document that was drafted by CSIS in 2021 about the PRC's essentially targeting of Canadian political actors for influence operations. And it wasn't published in 2021. It was published in 2023 and circulated to a small number of public servants. There was a second, more sanitized version with, for instance, names removed, produced of it. And the intention was that would be circulated more widely. And we've heard from the CSIS director, Mr. Vigneault, former director, that in his view, that should have been provided to you. So last time we broached this topic, Prime Minister was in camera, and at that time you'd never seen the targeting paper at all, and I understand that you now have? Okay.
Yes.
Having seen it now, do you have any views on whether it's something that should have come to your attention in 2023?
Well, one of the reflections I have on how this sort of piece of analysis has caused so much reflection around this commission and various chatter is the phrase targeting paper by China is fairly
alarming. What the targeting paper actually talks about is that China has broadly classified into 3 different groups parliamentarians in their diplomatic activities, some as being positive towards China and perhaps there to engage in constructive ways, others who are neutral or convincible to be more positive towards China, to show up at various events, and others who have demonstrated themselves to be more antagonistic to the Communist Party of China's government by speaking out strongly on the Uyghur issue or on human rights in Hong Kong or on various other of the issues that China doesn't like people to discuss publicly and criticize them on. The fact that Chinese diplomats are categorizing MPs in their outreach abilities into those 3 categories is not itself particularly revelatory to me or new information to me. It is fairly obvious, and it is part of what diplomats do in every country around the world. I mean, when we are busy fighting to defend or renegotiate NAFTA with the United States under the Trump administration a few years ago, we had very clear lists of, okay, this Republican governor could be very helpful to us. This one is going to be a challenge, so let's stay away from them or try and come at them or try to neutralize their influence on others. That's just part of diplomacy right there. I will say that having read the targeting paper in detail now, there were some interesting factoids or tidbits in there that I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. None of them significantly altered at all my perception of China's behavior, China's focus, China's engagement, influence, and in some cases interference in Canada to any significant degree. And I count on my national security and intelligence advisor to look at various products to make a determination whether or not they are ready to go to the Prime Minister. I think in both of these cases, the papers were at the other special report that you're going to be talking about in a moment were not in a final form according to the NSIA, and therefore there wasn't a decision made to pass it along to me. I have to trust the NSIA's judgment, as I said before, in knowing what is going to be useful for me, what is going to be an appropriate use of the 10 or 15 minutes worth of time that would take to go over a document like this, whether it adds to my knowledge or whether there, in those 10 or 15 minutes that she has to submit other information to me, there is more germane or more relevant information that she thinks would be a better use of my time. The determination was made in the case of this targeting paper, or the targeting paper didn't get to me because of decisions made by the NSIA or not made by the NSIA in terms of not choosing to pass it along. And I have faith, having looked at the papers, that it was indeed the right decision by the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, that it wasn't a document that significantly added in a relevant way to my understanding of the situation.
Okay. Just for clarity of the record, the evidence we actually heard from the NSIA at the time, Jody Thomas, was that she never received the final version. So she never even made that decision that it wouldn't go up to you. But so you brought out a couple of interesting themes in that answer, and one of which, yes, you've been paying attention, because the next document I was going to ask you about is the PCO special report. So why don't I go there, and then I'll ask you some more general questions about the 2 of them. So the special report then was the product produced by IAS, the PCO Intelligence Assessment Secretariat, late 21, early 2022. And this was, for everyone's benefit, drafted in collaboration with CSIS and essentially an overview of PRC foreign interference activities in Canada. This, as you've said, is one that wasn't finalized and ultimately never reached you and that you have now read. So in that time period where this was under discussion would be winter, spring 2022. And now having read it again, and you may have given part of this answer already, but is that something you would have wanted to have at that time? And are there any problems ensuing from the fact that you did not receive it then?
Again, there were elements and facts and examples in there that I had not seen before. But the overview and the pulling together of information, while useful, I'm sure, for people who were coming at this without the kind of regular briefings that I got, could have been very useful. I don't feel that there was anything in there that I didn't already understand and know about how China was engaging across different fields in Canada. It wasn't particularly new. It was a very useful and good piece of work that combined and compiled everything. And for someone new to the job would have been extraordinarily important. Even not just new to the job of Prime Minister, new to a role in the office, or trying as an introductory level of okay, now you need to understand this. But it was a compendium of many themes that I have been grappling with over the past number of years in regards to China. And I, again, feel that the NSIA was justified in not feeling that it was imperative that they put it rapidly on my desk, particularly because, as you say, it wasn't yet in its final form.
Okay. We're actually going to move to I'll come back to some of the questions I was going to ask you in themes around that, but I'm going to move to a different topic for now, which is unclassified briefings to parliamentarians. And for this, I'll ask the court registrar to pull up COM 363, please. And if we can scroll down to paragraph 126. Prime Minister, for your benefit, this is a discussion about a succession of memos suggesting that essentially unclassified briefings be provided broadly to parliamentarians. And what we see here is that NSICOP made this recommendation in 2018 and 2019, and there are 3 memos that were intended to go to you in some way, shape, or form. So one in December 2019 that was sent to PMO but never followed up on, and we heard from your staff that sort of fell through the COVID cracks at the beginning of the pandemic. One in December 2020, which was discussed within PMO but ultimately not actioned, and then the report mentions one in 2022, which was never finalized or even sent to PMO. So just to confirm, first of all, that none of these memos ended up reaching you. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we know that this initiative of broadly briefing parliamentarians eventually did happen in June 2024. So if none of these reached you, first question I'd like to ask is, should this have happened earlier? And are you troubled that it didn't?
My position has always been that providing more briefings to parliamentarians is a good thing. I am fully in favor of it. We all receive security briefings when we first get elected on not leaving documents hanging around, being careful about when you're speaking about delicate matters in a restaurant or on an airplane or anywhere people can overhear. We learn the basics of phone hygiene and how to keep your information secure. And I'm a huge believer in empowering parliamentarians to be able to be safe and thoughtful in how they do things. The briefings to parliamentarians that you receive when you get elected and security briefings ongoing are not directed by the government of the day. They're directed by the House of Commons itself, the Sergeant-at-Arms, if it's a matter of security, the Speaker's office. Briefings to all parliamentarians is not in general something that the government of the day is directly involved in. But these various documents are certainly something of these CSIS has the authorities to go to either the Speaker or the Sergeant-at-Arms and request for those briefings. These briefings didn't get to me, but these decision points didn't get to me, but I made it very clear throughout conversations that I would have approved of or encouraged briefings of parliamentarians. There is a process that I see regularly invoked. About every week or so, I sit down with the clerk of the Privy Council, and we go over changes to the senior ranks of the public service. We talk about particular issues that are coming forward, and part of our regular meetings is the clerk highlighting, okay, there's this note that we sent to your office that has been there for a week or two or for too long, and we need a return on this because this is important and we need this to be acted on. And I'll say, okay, we'll follow up, and we dig it up from the pile of notes that we get and make sure that we prioritize that. In this case, nobody, neither CSIS, through their minister to me or directly to the clerk or to the NSIA, flagged that this was something that was of importance to them that was stalled. And therefore, as you pointed out, they were not acted on in my office.
Why was your approval being sought, do you think? Was your approval necessary for this initiative?
As I said, my approval was not necessary for this initiative. It certainly wasn't wrong for them to check if they wanted to. I wasn't insulted that they did, or I wouldn't have been insulted that they did. But it wasn't part of the necessary steps. Often we get things for information. Oh, by the way, the minister is going to approve this. You should know about it, but it's within his or her authority to do. This is for information, not decision for you. Those are notes that we receive regularly that obviously, when they're relevant or germane, they get dealt with either through the office or directly to me. But in this case, the authority was not necessarily mine to give.
Okay, and would it have fallen to a minister, for the Minister of Public Safety, for instance?
I mean, it could have, or the CSIS could have checked in with its minister. The Minister of Public Safety is directly the minister that oversees and is responsible for CSIS. I know that the director of CSIS has direct access to the Minister of Public Safety in a very regular way. If there have been concerns around this, the CSIS director could have gone to the minister either for a signals check or for help in moving it through the approvals process in the Prime Minister's office, or to even check that maybe I should just go straight to the Sergeant-at-Arms in Parliament to actually take on this briefing. And as far as I know, CSIS did not bring up this with even its own minister.
Okay.
I have one question, Mr. the Prime Minister.
Oui.
Do you have any idea why no reply was ever given to all of those that requested the authorization?
Well, I think as was stated in the first case, it was in process when COVID happened, and we all moved to different priorities and virtually. In other cases, in the third case, it actually didn't get to my office. In the second case, no, I don't know why.
Okay, because if an authorization is asked from your office and no authorization is needed, at least in your view, usually do you, not you personally, but your office give the information to the person requesting the authorization or not at all?
It depends on the amount of the amount of notes, the various priorities of them as they go through. I really can't speak to the challenges around that particular one, other than saying that I was always very clear that briefings to parliamentarians is a good thing.
Thank you.
Okay, the next possibly related, possibly not topic I want to talk about is ministerial accountability in the foreign interference space. So we can bring up CAN 030999. Prime Minister, these are notes. This is not something you would have seen. This is notes or minutes from DMFI, which is Deputy Ministers on Foreign Interference Committee meeting in April 2023. And if we can just scroll down so we can see the third and fourth bullet there. The NSI at the time here was Jody Thomas, and this is a discussion that was had at that meeting on essentially where ministerial account